The shield of Achilles is created after Achilles' original armor, worn by Patroclus in battle, is taken after the death of Patroclus. The events leading up to the creation of the shield begin with Agamemnon. After Agamemnon was forced to give up the maiden Chryseis, he then took the maiden Briseis from Achilles. This humiliated Achilles, and he then refused to fight for the Achaeans because Agamemnon had dishonored him. This causes problems for the Achaeans, as Achilles is one of the army's best warriors. Achilles also asks his mother Thetis, a sea nymph, to ask Zeus to punish the Achaean army for what Agamemnon did to him. So, despite the fact that his wife Hera favors the Greeks, Zeus starts helping the Trojans. Attempting to make up with Achilles, Agamemnon offers Achilles a great amount of gifts to try and get him to fight for the Achaeans again. However, Achilles does not accept this offer, and the Greek army continues to struggle. Later, Achilles' closest friend, Patroclus, tries to get Achilles to rejoin the war. When Achilles refuses, however, he allows Patroclus to wear his armor into battle so that the Trojans will believe that Achilles is fighting. However, Patroclus is killed by Hector in battle, and all of Achilles' armor is taken. Despite Achilles' absence from the war, he grieves over the death of his friend and intends to avenge Patroclus by killing Hector. Since Achilles no longer had armor, his mother Thetis has the god Hephaestus make a new set for him. Included in this new set are a breastplate, a helmet, and Achilles' shield. This shield is described in great detail, and the 9 sections of the shield are described as the earth, sky and sea, the sun, the moon, and the constellations, 2 beautiful cities full of people, and 1 a wedding and a litigation scene are taking place, and the other city is besieged by an army, and the shield shows an ambush and a battle, a field being plowed for the 3rd time, a king's estate where a harvest is being taken, a vineyard with grape pickers, a herd of straight-horned cattle. The lead bull has been attacked by a pair of lions, in which the herdmen and their dogs are trying to fight off, a picture of a sheep farm, an area in which young men and women are dancing, and lastly an ocean on the outermost rim. The shield is also 5 layers thick with a 3-ply rim and silver strap. The passage about the shield of Achilles is an example of ekphrasis, which is a literary description of a visual work of art. This is significant in the Iliad because it dramatically contrasts with the rest of the poem, considering that the Iliad focuses more on action and narrative with all the battles and interactions with the characters rather than visual descriptions. There are many different interpretations of the meaning of Achilles' shield. One theory is that the shield represents the entire world, and that included on the shield are 2 different kinds of contrasts. For example, the sun and the moon, and the 2 cities in which one is thriving and the other is being attacked. A German writer claims that these contrasts may represent the basis of a civilized, orderly life. These contrasts have also been seen as showing the bad in relation to the good. For example, making us see war in relation to peace. The creation of Achilles' armor, including the shield, helps set a more dramatic tone in the poem. The extravagance of the shield would imply the magnificence of its strength and power. Since Achilles has been mostly absent in the war throughout the Iliad so far, the description of his armor and shield are a sort of prelude to the dramatic entrance of the talented warrior. Putting extreme emphasis on the shield, a device used for protection, may help imply the strength of Achilles and suggest that he may be almost invincible during a battle. The Iliad is always thought to represent many of the themes of the human experience, and it does so by showing only a few days of a 10-year war. The shield itself is also only one piece of Achilles' armor, and only one of many objects used in battle, but it provides perspective on the entire war. As it depicts normal scenes of life, it represents the world beyond the battlefield, and that the war is not everything. So despite Homer's glorification of war and the warrior, his subtle depiction of everyday life and people may be considered equally as noble, if not more so. The shield's place in the story also comes between the fight over Patroclus' body and Achilles returning to the war. Achilles' return into the battle, influenced by his intent to kill Hector in order to avenge the death of Patroclus, becomes one of the most violent and bloodiest parts of the poem, and so some believe that the ekphrasis of the shield may represent the calm before the storm, and may have been used to emphasize the brutality of the violence in the Trojan War. Another interpretation of the shield is that the world on the shield is Achilles' own personal world, and that the shield is a microcosm that reflects the macrocosm of the Iliad. In the section of the shield that contains the two cities, there is a scene of litigation in which we see a plaintiff, a defendant, a circle of judges, and another circle of observers. This scene may serve to represent and identify the legal and moral issues of the Trojan War and the Iliad. The scenes could also be metaphorical representations of life. The depictions in each of the rings are meant to tell a story or to teach a lesson. With this interpretation, the center of the shield may represent a metaphor for Earth in relation to the cosmos or a heavenly environment. Next, the first ring would be a metaphor for city life, and it shows different aspects of social control. For example, the law case and the wedding signify legal events that are attributed heavily to city life. The second ring, with this theory, is a metaphor or representation of war, which is the result of man's selfish flaws, such as greed, passion, and jealousy, and that the city of Troy, even with its massive wall and gates, could not protect itself from the inevitable punishment. The fault in this case would be Paris taking Helen from Menelaus, and so, even when the gods intervened in favor of Troy, the city could not escape its faults and was doomed to be destroyed. After the war, everything in the city would have been destroyed. All lifestyles established in this city would be destroyed, and these citizens would have to almost completely start over. So the natural option would be to disperse into the countryside, and the lines here would represent the hardships of the new lives encountered by these immigrants. And these country areas may eventually become crowded again, and a new city will emerge. Lastly, the waves on the outer rim represent the generations of men that are destined to repeat this cycle. In the center, the earth, moon, and sun and stars are set and unable to change their ways. However, the cycle of war and peace, which is also incredibly repetitive, is not involuntary like the planets and stars. Because of this, there is a lesson to be learned about fairness in valuing peace, and the shield itself is defending this peace. In the book, The Poetics of Disguise, the interpretation of the shield is, quote, an image of the hero's consciousness. It reflects the cosmos while representing it, and is thus the first symbolic image of art's capacity to function as a stereoscope. The first model of reality has been created. The first work contains its own interpretation. Art has already the power to formulate art. The cosmos contains the poem in which resides the shield that reflects the universe. The poem becomes an image of the cosmos, so complete as to discourage any attempt to compete with it. Author W. H. Auden wrote a poem in 1952, also entitled The Shield of Achilles, and was a response to the ekphrasis of the shield in the Iliad. The poem is written with two different types of stanzas. The one with shorter lines describe the making of the shield by Hephaestus. The stanzas with longer lines describe the scenes that Hephaestus created on the shield, scenes of a barren and impersonal modern world, which was Auden's more modern interpretation of the scenes depicted on the original shield. In the closing stanza in short lines, Thetis cries out in disgust at the shield. The purpose of this poem was to describe the contrast of what Auden viewed the Achillean world as, and how he viewed the present world in 1952. The author was upset by the totalitarian state of the world, which he felt completely restricted the growth of the individual. The shield, he believed, represented the idea that imagination naturally ran to scenes of peace, even in a world that was living during warfare. In the end, Auden's message was to criticize the modern world, which was savage, and learn from the ancient one that valued peace and the individual more. Written as an ekphrasis, the shield of Achilles is described in great detail in the Iliad, and today is known as one of the most famous symbols in the poem, and has been the inspiration for other authors such as W. H. Auden as a representation of the time of the Trojan War. While we may never know what Homer's original intention for the description of the shield was, its inclusion in the Iliad is significant, as it contrasts from the tone of the rest of the poem, and the different scenes of the shield show the reader more information about the time period rather than just the Trojan War.